I think we probably have time to get into another question on this episode. And that is, what markets would you consider for build for rent? Is there a right answer there?
There's a lot of great options, in my opinion. And the more you understand and the more you do your homework and understand each market, there's a lot of opportunity. But I would say pick where you feel comfortable. And for me, I started here in Utah. Luckily, Utah's a hot market, right? But that's where I first started because I knew it. It was in my backyard. But the more that I started to research like Idaho or Arizona, Texas, some of these other markets, I saw a lot of similarities and a lot of opportunity there. But a good place to start is where you feel comfortable.
Yeah, sometimes your own backyard. I think you also want to be aware of how landlord-friendly a place would be, right? If you're going to be a landlord, you want some protection on your side.
Yeah.
So there's definitely states you want to avoid, but...
Do you want to pick on any states, Sherida? Is that what you're getting at?
No, I'm not going to name drop states.
Okay, then I will.
Here we go.
Massachusetts and New York and California and Washington and Oregon and Connecticut, Maryland. I mean, these are all states where I'm not saying you can't make money. And there's more, by the way. We could do more. We're just trying to generate lots of hate mail here on our first episode. But they're not known to be very landlord friendly. And when we talk about build for rent, it's the local building code and the inspections and everything that you have to deal with. Look, if I said those and you're sitting there going, hey, that's mean, you actually know it's true if you live in one of those cities and you own property. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't make money. It actually doesn't mean that you can't make a lot of money. There's that saying in business that if it were easy, everybody would do it, right? And so so people want to live in those places. Is there tenant demand, right? I think that's the ultimate key.
Yep.
Do people want to pay rent? Is rent going up? You can usually figure things out from there. It might be harder, and we'll pick on Massachusetts. It might be more difficult, but it doesn't mean it's not possible, and it doesn't mean it's not profitable. But what you said, for somebody who maybe is going to go outside of their backyard, because I agree, it's easy to know and operate in your own backyard. But if you're going to go outside of it, it probably makes sense to be somewhere that's landlord friendly and has some of those laws on the books that are more favorable, because when you're doing it from afar, you need everything in your favor that you can possibly get.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But something else about the backyard thing is there's certain cities and places in Utah I wouldn't go. So it could be very specific within that state as well.
Well, you do the majority of your investing in Utah. So why wouldn't you go to those places?
Just like what you mentioned, demand for rentals and also employment rates as well. Is there high employment rates, and what is the vacancy rates going to be? Those are two key indicators that I look for that you'll want to study into in each market that are specific.
So the three of us, once upon a time, when was this? When we took our trip to Texas. Remember that? We looked at duplexes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That was like 6 months ago.
Yeah, beginning of the year.
I know. In the COVID era, nobody knows when things happened. I can't remember. It's all a blur. But we saw some good-looking product, some of it in the core of San Antonio, and the rest kind of out in what I felt like was the sticks. And I know some investors that have purchased there. They seem happy, but the jury is still out, right? When things are going good, things are going good, right? You can invest almost anywhere and look like a genius. But when things aren't going so good, you find out what you really have. And that's what I want to see with those particular duplexes that we saw that were out in the middle of nowhere. I kept thinking, well, who are these people? Who's clamoring to pay rent out here?
Well, where do they work? What are they doing? Yeah,
right.
I mean, there's a lot of questions behind that. How far are they willing to commute? I mean, there's other things that play into that, right? Are they willing to commute a little more because the rent's less? Yeah, but is that something you want to take on risk-wise?
Yeah, well, and it's exactly that. Are they willing to do it? And the developer had their reasons. Some of them made sense. Others I had issues with. We're not going to know. Now, you might be a really careful investor. You might say, well, I'm not investing there then because I don't want the jury to be out. I want to invest in an urban core where I know no matter what, there's going to be a huge likelihood that there will always be tenants, there will always be businesses. And that's great, but it comes with a cost, doesn't it? You want that? You want that certitude with tenants? It's going to cost you. You get cheap land out in the middle of nowhere anytime. So
there's two questions involved there.
Yeah.
And I like what you said. Will it rent? And most of the time it's yes, unless it's in the middle of nowhere. But that will probably rent too. The next question is how much is it going to rent for?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then once you understand those two things, then you can pencil your numbers and see what the cap rate's going to be, cash flow, and see if it makes sense or not.
Well, everything rents at a price.
Yeah, exactly. Is it going to be $100?
But is that price going to eat you alive?
Exactly.
Right. In the build for rent world, your financing and all of your projections are based on a certain rental price. So you've got to have some elasticity in that price. You've got to know, hey, look, I've seen units renting for $1,200 a month. It seems like that's very easy to do around here, but I'm going to hit the market with 50 of these that are kind of a similar floor plan. Maybe I should plan on like, a $1,000 rent special for the first year and build all my models off of that. Because if you outperform it, then good for you. But if the project success lives or dies by you having to hit that in the first year, this is not the right deal for you, I don't think.
Well, and I think that's why when we're analyzing projects, putting pro formas together, we're looking at it saying, what's a conservative viewpoint, right? Like we want to be conservative. We're not projecting market rents that are going to be in a year. We're looking at what's current market rent right now and maybe going even a little bit below that in some cases, or right in between where, the high and the low is and what we feel product-wise, how our product fits in that.
And we've been fortunate because we've been in a really good rental market where a lot of times over the last, 5 to 8 years, the rents are typically $50 at least, or sometimes even $150 to $200 more per unit, which makes the numbers that much better. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's all about looking at the comps and seeing what surrounding similar rental properties are renting for. Being conservative, I like that.
Go do your due diligence.
Yeah, and then understanding, okay, what's being built, what's coming in, taking it a step further as well.
Well, it's very tempting, and I've seen this happening lately. I mean, what about when the music stops, right?
Yeah.
If you've been investing the last 5 to 8 years, that's that rising tide lifts all boats, right? No matter what you built, the rent was probably higher when the unit was completed than what you thought it was going to be when you projected it. And I've started to see a few people starting to go, it doesn't work at current market rents, but I think they're going to be here in a year. And everything is built on what they think is going to happen in a year. That's a hard position to be in because you're trying to make a deal work. And, sometimes I've found myself going down that path a little bit. I think you got to be careful about it.
Yeah, definitely.
When you're deciding a market, and I think that's the original question we asked here, how do you decide which markets are best? It needs to be one that you know. Mm-hmm. Right? You need to be able to look at a deal and say, if those rents are too low, that projection is too high, nobody's going to rent that. It's a funny market. We talked about this about 18 months ago. Well, we expanded our business operations into Phoenix, Arizona, and looking at lots of land opportunities. And everybody kept saying, go to Buckeye, right? If you know Phoenix, Buckeye. What is it, Chase? Probably 90 minutes outside of downtown to get to Buckeye? Maybe an hour?
Maybe an hour.
Maybe an hour?
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't feel like an hour. It feels like more. Because when you leave the west side of the valley, it's like you're in an old Western movie, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah.
You're on the 10 on your way out to Los Angeles, but it's like there's nothing there. And then all of a sudden, Buckeye shows up. And it's there, and there's Home Depot and Lowe's and restaurants and movie theaters and everything. And you're going, wait, why is this here? Right? I can't figure it out. So people kept saying, you need to go to Buckeye. That might be true now. I don't know yet. But I said, well, why do we need to go to Buckeye? And I remember our project superintendent, Mike, kept saying, well, it's blowing up. Why? Well, it's just blowing up. I'm like, I don't get it. Why is it blowing up? Well, at the time, and like I said, this may be different. It's been a while since I've dived into Buckeye. But people from California could move to Buckeye, Arizona and buy 2 acres and build on it or just have their own property. That's why it was blowing up, is because it was cheap to live there. But the employment base for tenants that were ready and willing to pay a lot of rent wasn't there, right? They could easily go into the city, into like Surprise and Goodyear and Tolleson and some of those cities right on the west side. That's where they worked. That's where they could also live. So I wasn't ready unless we had rents that were substantially cheaper than in the core of the city. Because what else would incentivize somebody to drive out to Buckeye at night after they work somewhere, in the logistical area up there along the 303, right? So that's something you have to consider too. I bet it's different now, though. We should check into it.
Yeah. That's been kind of fun too. Sometimes just even going when we're trying to analyze a piece of dirt that we have that we're getting ready to sell out to our investors, has been going into some of the other property management companies or just, making phone calls, but driving the area. Know, like we've said a few different times on here, know the market, know the area, go do some due diligence, drive around, ask questions, see who the neighbors are. Makes a huge difference. And look at it from a tenant's perspective. If you're a tenant, are you going to want to drive to this location? Do you feel safe here? Is it close to amenities? We like to be close to freeways. One of our inside jokes is there a Costco or a Chick-fil-A close by? If so, let's buy it. So,
yep.
And a good example of that is the Greenway project we did in El Mirage. If you look up El Mirage online, it's not going to have flying colors, but if you actually drive it and go there, take a look at it, it's in one of the better locations of El Mirage in Arizona.
Yeah,
so
there's a story to tell with every project.
I think it helps to look at it.
Boots on the ground.
Yeah.
I think before we wrap it up, another really helpful piece of advice to anybody considering build for rent is one good thing that the age of COVID, stupid COVID, all right, has given us is these city council meetings are all recorded and they're all online now. They're usually broadcast live. You can be sitting in Missouri and you can watch the city council meeting in Seattle, right, that night. And you can see what are the other projects being proposed in the area? What's being built over here? What's being built over there? Because having insight into that makes you look out across that raw land in an entirely different way, right? You know what's coming. So we kind of talked about don't do projects because of, here's what I think it'll be in the future. But that's not entirely correct advice because you got to know what's happening in the future, right? And if you see a bunch of other developers and office managers making plans, that'll tell you something about a project you're considering.